biodiversity. Oh, there we go. I got the recording going. Thank you, Michael. The Biodiversity Committee deals with nature-based solutions to things, and we will have our next meeting on Sunday, January 14th. At our last meeting, we looked at one of our members, Jeff Boville, is working on getting greening a school that's in Santa Monica, getting a bunch of native species into it. It's all an asphalt place now, turning it into a place where we can get some life there. We were heavily involved in a large statement that we put out recently on plans to change the museum and redo the grounds at the La Brea Tar Pits, the Page Museum there and the Hancock Park grounds there. We've been involved in the battle against covering the planet in plastic carpet, or as some prefer to call it, artificial turf, something we're heavily involved in, and working with the San Fernando Valley chapter as well, in terms of trying to motivate some legislation on this, both at the local level and at the state level. And also, in particular, our chapter is working with school districts trying to avoid schools putting the plastic carpet everywhere. And if you don't know why plastic carpet's a bad thing, it is. Come to our committee, we'll explain it. I won't take up too much of your time now. So I'm going to bump to the next committee and we'll give very brief committee reports, and then we'll move on to the next thing in our meeting tonight. How about the Climate Curricula Committee? Jeannie, are you here? Yeah, I think you are. There you are.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, we think we have a groundswell of interest in climate curriculum. We have 306 climate champions who are teachers at schools in Los Angeles Unified. They are engaged in getting oriented and having opportunities for professional development. We, as a committee, have provided a lot of resources to help to offer our support in orienting the climate champions. It's interestingly enough, the LA Unified adult schools have climate champions. So there's a growth and interest in climate literacy in the adult schools, and LA Unified has a number of adult schools. I had the privilege of working with a California Youth Climate Policy Project, and we had 5 students from LA schools who gave public testimony at the recent LA Unified School Board meeting. 1 was on zero waste, 2 was on solar panels, having more solar panels on schools, 3 had to do with climate literature, and a 4th had to do with corporate accountability and neoliberalism. We had a recent presentation by Tree People at our curriculum meeting, and I think those are some of the major developments. We've had several meetings with school district officials, and we're trying to get more involvement of representation on the climate literacy task force, particularly by teachers and members of United Teachers Los Angeles. There was a climate cool down game. I don't know if everybody's heard about that, which was presented at one of our previous meetings as well. And we're hoping to try that out, or maybe some people are already trying it out. Anyway, thanks for the opportunity, and it's good to see everyone.
Thank you, Jeannie. I appreciate the work you are doing. Moving on to our next committee report. Do we have anyone from community engagement? I believe David's here.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
The chat. If not, I'll get it in the chat. Cecile Namer-Pye and I co-chair the Community Engagement Committee, and we have several purposes. Cecile does most of the greeting of new members and trying to get people oriented to places in our chapter or in related groups where you can be effective, getting on the right committees and so on. And what I do is mostly liaison work with other chapters of Climate Reality. I also do work with the Climate Reality California Coalition. I regularly attend the San Fernando Valley meetings, the Riverside County meetings, our meetings. Occasionally I get to Orange County and San Diego County. I have more conflicts there, but also with other groups, including Elders Climate Action, Third Act, some chapters of 350, and I just made contact with Extinction Rebellion, which is probably a little too radical for some of you people, but so I'm trying to make those connections, and both Cecile and I could really use help. So if you're interested, for instance, I know a lot about the Sierra Club in the Inland Empire, but I don't have that great contacts with the Sierra Club in Los Angeles, the Angeles chapter. So, and some of the 350 groups I know, some of them I don't know. And I get to know one Sunrise group, but I don't know the other Sunrise groups. And we're particularly looking, as Charles mentioned, for this young adult demographic. A lot of times when we say youth, we cut it off at 18, but it's really the 20 to 35-year-olds, 40-year-olds that we would really like to get involved and get you into leadership. That's it.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Yes, and if I gave the wrong impression, we're not just looking for teenagers. We're also looking for anybody in any age group. But yeah, you're right. We need to get some of the younger people in there so we don't age out and have nothing left of our chapter. But you're absolutely right. Moving on now. How about the food committee? I'm sorry. No, that's next. Yeah, the food committee on my list. Do we have anybody from the food committee? Did I see Jen?
I'm here.
Yay. All right. You're up.
Hi there. Yeah, sorry, I'm just breastfeeding my baby right now, so just give me one moment.
Okay. Do you want me to
Yeah,
excuse you and come back? Oh, okay.
I don't have my camera on, but just wanted to give an update. First of all, that there's an action alert that was provided in one of the most recent email newsletters to protect IRA's conservation funds, and I'm happy to send a link in the chat. But essentially, just to give a brief rundown of that, last year, the passage of the IRA included a historic $20 billion investment in conservation and climate-smart agriculture. And now, at the moment, members of Congress are trying to divert those funds towards commodity programs, which would only benefit the wealthiest farms. And so there's a quick outreach tool that I'll attach to help get that back in to other farmers. And the second update that I have is that both Lisa and I, the co-leaders of this committee, are kind of rethinking our kind of involvement in the food committee. And so if anybody wants to step up and be part of the leadership team, we'd be happy to chat with you. And I'll also drop my email address if anybody wants to reach out to me about that.
Great, Jen. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys have done some really important work, and we appreciate the time you've spent in that leadership capacity.
Absolutely.
And if you guys are new to this and this is your first time at one of our meetings, I know these committee reports are a little bit dry, especially if you're hearing stuff that you're not familiar with and you're don't have experience with. These are just little overviews to tell you some of the things that are going on in the committees. Much of our work out on the front lines of actually fighting the fight for climate is done by these committees. And we really get into the weeds of the particular issues that the committees focus on. And so these are just very quick overviews of the issue. But if you're interested in those issues, come to these committee meetings and participate. If you didn't hear the committee meeting being told in terms of the next meeting, go to the calendar on our website, laclimatereality.org at any time, and you can get the calendar there and tell you when the next meeting is for a given committee. And everybody's welcome at every meeting all the time. So stop by and see if it's something that would make sense for you. That's going to take me to the OG of our particular chapter. Andrew is the head of legislative and policy, and he's also the head of the Climate Business Working Group, which is a national committee, and he usually kind of combines those reports. So I'm going to throw it over to Andrew Ellis. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Charles. Welcome, everybody, and thanks so much for letting me speak about the legislative team that the Los Angeles chapter has put together. We meet on the fourth Monday of every month. And so in November, that happens to be tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. I'll put the link in the chapter for anybody who wants to join us. You'll be joining a team of about 40 LA chapter climate leaders, and we work in conjunction with a team of the San Fernando Valley team. So it's about 90 or more people working on legislative matters. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that there's a opportunity from the Climate Action California partners. These are our folks that work with the Climate Reality California Coalition. Janet Cox and the group there is having their legislative trainings. So that's coming up in DC. It's split now between two dates, December 6th and January 4th. I'll put the information there in the chat as well. And if you would like to participate in the legislative leadership, I'm sort of the acting legislative chair. Charles knows this. And so if you want to co-chair or if you want to run the leadership team, I've put my contact information in there as well. Just write to Charles or Andy Hatala, vice chair, or me, and let us know of your interest. And you can take over this committee, and I can, as Charles said, put my efforts towards the National Climate Business Working Group. I will say the Climate Business Working Group always meets on the third Monday of every month. Thanks so much, Charles, and I appreciate everybody's time tonight.
Thank you, Andrew. Andrew's been here from the very beginning of our chapter and has always been a real driving force. And, you know, the secret is he keeps saying he's the acting chair of legislative and policy, and I know he needs help and I know he wants more people, but we kind of want him to stay in that capacity as long as we can get him to, because he does such a great job. So it's kind of a, you know, cognitive dissonance when I hear him say the word acting. But that being said, it's one of the greatest ways to learn about how the sausage is made with respect to climate, to be quite frank, in terms of the legislative functions of our society battling these issues and all the interests that line up against it too, and understanding what politicians face when they're dealing with that. All right, now let's go to Michael and Ashley on the marketing committee. Michael?
Hello, thank you. Yeah, my name is Michael Rockmess. I'm co-chair of the marketing committee along with Ashley Dawson. And our job is to promote the chapter via social media, the website, and the newsletter. And we post recordings of the meetings in case you missed them or want to check out some of the old ones to the website as well as to YouTube. And so I'd really encourage all of you to follow us on social media if you aren't already, especially Instagram is where we're most active at this point. And if you are following us, please like and share our content. And if you're new, you'll be added to the newsletter. If you don't want it, you just unsubscribe. If for some reason you've been around and you aren't getting the newsletter, you can send me a note via the chat and I'll just make sure you're subscribed to it. Sometimes it's people accidentally unsubscribe. You know, please visit our website, laclimatereality.com. We, you know, try to post the most interesting things to the homepage and the calendar. And so the calendar is a great thing to check out. And if you're involved in any other groups that have climate activities or you know of other climate events, especially in Los Angeles, you can submit them to us and we'll add them to our calendar to help promote them.
I have one note.
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Charles.
have one note to jump in on Michael, because Michael runs our website and he just gave you the wrong URL. It's laclimatereality.org, not .com. So not to correct, but I want you to see all the hard work that he's done on the website. So it's laclimatereality.org.
Thank you, Charles.
You bet. Is Ashley here?
Yeah, thank you for catching that. Yeah, so please visit the right URL. And lastly, we are looking for volunteers at any point. So if you think you would like to help us with these activities, we're going, our next meeting is not scheduled yet, but will be posted to our calendar soon. And so you can check there or you can send me a note and I will make sure to let you know. That's it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Do we have a separate report from Ashley as well this time or no?
No, not today.
Okay. Gotcha. Excellent. Moving on. Last and certainly not least is my absolutely indispensable former chair of the chapter and current vice chair of the chapter, Andy, giving us the water report.
Thank you, Charles. I will try to be brief with this weather update. So the Water Committee has joined with the LA and San Fernando Valley Ledge Committees to meet with the offices of city council members to advocate for that ban on turf that Charles mentioned. The ban would increase and improve water retention, just so everyone knows why it's so important. We're also advocating for more sustainable solutions to water security and drought mitigation, like water recycling, rainwater capture, renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and nature-based solutions, trying to hit it all. We're also advocating for this through letters and in meetings for any state bills that will advance these solutions, particularly within California. And while California is not in a state of drought, emphasis there. The new legislative session will be beginning in January, so we're trying to get them to plan ahead. For our presentations, we're practicing and updating topical presentations on the water crises and impactful solutions to mitigate and solve them. I'm happy to share and even deliver the presentations to anyone that's interested. On the digital front, we're reviewing and updating our current water infographics, any videos and committee webpage content, and creating specific social media posts about the crises and solutions. And for in-person actions, if anyone is interested in preserving and upkeeping sacred native natural spaces, everyone's welcome to volunteer at Curravunga Springs on the first Saturday of each month from 10 to 12. That would be Saturday, December 2nd. For the next one, the activity is an extension of the land acknowledgement. It transforms them from statements to actions. It showcases the value, impact, and benefit of nature-based solutions. And if you want another connection to water, the water in the springs is over 30 years old, and it flows down from the neighboring mountains. So I'll put the link in the chat on how to learn more about that. And then on the non-water front, the winter edition of the Sustainable Holidays post has been updated and uploaded to our chapter Instagram account and Facebook. So please review, reference, use, and share at your leisure and give it a like if you do in fact like it. That's it for me. Thank you, Charles, and thank you all.
Great, Andy. Thank you very much for all you guys are doing. All right, I want to give you a little bit of, I'm going to cover brief announcements in a second here, some upcoming events. But first, I want to give you a little tease of what is in store for you tonight and the great bonus items for you having come to this meeting this evening. So as you guys remember, may recall, if you've been to previous meetings, we usually have a little trivia contest at the end of at the end of the discussion. Oh, looks like our guest is here. So I'm gonna save that for the end. So all I'm going to tell you is that there's going to be really good gifts if you stay around and you pay attention during the actual interview tonight. So that's really important for you. Very quickly, a couple other announcements before we go to the interview. As Andy just mentioned, on Saturday, September 2nd, we're going to have a volunteer day at 10 a.m. at Curravunga Springs. That's on our website if you want to find out more. Same as the California Legislative Advocacy Training that we are doing on December 6th at 4 p.m. We're doing that with a couple other organizations. Take a look at the website. Lastly, the thing I want you to remember for sure is we are doing an end of the year party for the chapter on Sunday, December 17th at 7 p.m. That's a Sunday evening. And our marketing committee has promised me there are going to be online shenanigans and games. So this should be quite entertaining and the pressure is on. So come, if nothing else, to make sure that they live up to their promise to give us some very interesting online activities at our last meeting of 2023. And with that, I'm going to now transition to introducing our guest for this evening in our Climate Reality Movers and Shakers series. We are so privileged to have Ed Begley Jr. with us this evening, not just because what I mentioned to you earlier, that he's had health difficulties this week and he's still decided the show must go on and he would be here for us this evening, which is pretty amazing. But also because he is just a truly wonderful person to have to talk about climate issues as well. He's a 6-time Emmy nominee. He's been in recent things. For those of you who are younger and don't remember older work, there's a wonderful movie out called Amsterdam he was in recently. Also, he was a recurring role on Better Call Saul. Some really interesting TV. Some of the better TV shows really of the last 15 years have had Ed in them, including Portlandia. And I have to tell you, I'm a Star Trek nerd, and I am going to ask Ed a question. I have to, about a 2-part cliffhanger episode of Star Trek Voyager he was in the 90s, where he played a character named Henry Starling, who was kind of a Bill Gates kind of character. It was really cool kind of a thing where the Voyager crew from the future, the 24th century, goes back to the 20th century. And Ed he plays the heavy and he brings it and he rocks it. And so if you're a Star Trek nerd, he's forever enshrined in that history as well. Lots of other things. He was on 137 episodes of St. Elsewhere, which if you didn't watch TV in the 80s, he was kind of the centerpiece of that show and got nominated for a bunch of Emmys for that work. And on top of that, I went to film school to make films like Christopher Guest made, basically. And I never quite got there, and I transitioned into other things. But that being said, if I have a list of like the 20 best films of all time, films like Best in Show and Mighty Wind are on that list for me. And Ed is part of those films. So he's kind of a hero of mine without even him knowing it as well for that work. And he was also in Spinal Tap. Isn't that cool? I mean, that's like the coolest cult film ever, right? With that introduction, I should also add, of anybody in Hollywood, this is the man who for the last 40, 50 years really has been known for walking the walk in terms of being an environmental advocate. Not just somebody who shows up at fancy dinners and says, yes, let's give money to save the whales or something like that. This is a guy who lives a life that is as sustainable as it can reasonably be. And he's very open about that, has been talking about that, has been advocating for that. And quite frankly, this is the kind of person that is a role model for everybody when we're out here busy looking at our climate crisis and ways that we can make an individual impact. And so we're tremendously privileged to have Ed with us this evening. And thank you very much for coming, Ed.
Thank you so much for having me. I think the world of climate reality and the wonderful work you personally do, and I'm just honored to be here with you. It's great to hear that long list of film accomplishments too, and television shows. I cherish that work. But the work that you're doing here at Climate Reality is just, there's nothing more important. This is one that you don't want to sit out. And I know the whole group before us today is not sitting it out. They're very active. And I'm proud to be in that number since 1970, the first Earth Day. So I'm honored to be with you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you know, for those of you who don't know, I was only scratching the surface on his credits and his achievements and honors as an environmentalist. But I could just do that for the next 45 minutes and then we wouldn't have an interview. So let's move on and let's ask him a few questions. First of all, I did tell people at the beginning that you had some health struggles this week, and we're tremendously thankful for you making an effort. I want to say, though, if at any point that this interview gets too intense and you're not feeling up to it, just let me know and we'll wrap it up because that's totally cool. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to first kind of ask you a personal question. I'd like to hear if you could tell us maybe, is there a situation that comes to mind where being an environmentalist worked against you in terms of your work as an actor or getting work or any particular job you were already on? Is there a story behind any of that?
In the 90s, it was reported to be a problem by my agents and managers, and I thought that was silly. I didn't think that was the case. And before I tell you a couple of stories, I'll tell you, my name was never on a blacklist in a drawer anywhere. I wasn't officially blacklisted. I think the truth is I just gave people the creeps. They were afraid that I was going to jump out of the bushes and go, you're getting an SUV, you're a bad person, and you're killing the whole world. I don't know what they thought I was going to do, and I don't do things that way. It's very important to have the loud voices that we have, the people that do bring attention to the problems. But there are many different creatures in the ecosystem that do things in different ways. You know, and my way has always been to, you know, this is what I'm doing and join me if you will. It's working for me, you know. And so that's the way I've done it. But this actually happened. I remember once being on a movie, it was called Page Master with Macaulay Culkin. And I showed up in my little electric car in 1993. At that point, I'd been driving electric cars on and off since 1970, but I had a pretty good one, kind of a, you know, it was a conversion car or something. A VW Rabbit converted to electric, and I drove it to the location, and I could see one of the assistant directors with a headset on in the background. I could see he was a certain distance away, but I could hear pretty good. And so he was going, no, I haven't talked to him yet. I don't know what we're going to do. Hold on a second. I think he sees me. I think he's listening to us right now. Hold on. I got to go talk to him. Ed, sit down, please. I said, is there a problem or something? Am I being fired? No, you're not being fired, Ed, but we've been trying now for weeks before you showed up. We couldn't find one. We've been all over the United States and we could not find one. And I'm so sorry. We're just begging you, please, to finish the day's work and not, you know, shut down the set. That's all we're hoping. We're going to shoot tonight, but we promise it won't be a problem. You don't even have to turn the engine on. I said, what are you talking about? I said, we've been looking for an electric station wagon all over America for weeks before you shoot. I said, I don't think there's an electric station wagon anywhere in America. I know a lot about electric cars. I never heard of one. Said, what is the shot? It's just, I just have to roll down the driveway. So I sat in the car and I rolled the car backwards down the driveway. They thought I was going to shut down the thing by just sitting in an internal combustion vehicle, let alone starting it. So I clearly had frightened people at that point.
And this is in the early 90s when truthfully, you're very much an early adopter because, quite frankly, for most of us, electric vehicles were not a realistic option in the early 90s. They just weren't available for people, and they were very, very expensive, and they weren't very practical by comparison today.
Right. And I didn't have one of those fancy electric cars, like Henry Ford's wife drove a Baker Electric. I didn't have one of those like collector's items things from 1910, but I did have this. I had a VW Rabbit a friend converted to electric. It was 10 grand, which is not a bad price for an electric car back then. And I drove that. And then finally, as you say, the more expensive cars like the EV1 came along. Then finally from that, I went into a Toyota RAV4 electric, and from that into a Nissan Leaf. And from that finally into a car with even greater range. But, I tried to show that it was, possible to do that we could make cars like that, what I attempted to show. But I always put the emphasis on more cost-effective stuff like taking public transportation and riding my bike. I would ride my bike to the Oscar party at the Vanity Fair party, there at Morton's. And I didn't do it for publicity. I really didn't. But suddenly all the paparazzi were, following me over to where I was locking my bike up. Ed, hold the helmet up, put the helmet down, pick the bike up, get close to the bike, Ed. Can you kneel down next to the bike? And they were taking all these shots suddenly. And it was a big story that I had ridden my bike to the Oscar party. And so I thought, well, not bad. Might as well, opportunity knocks, promote bike riding. And I've tried to do that sort of thing ever since, before and since.
I remember seeing that coverage at the time. And when I was in film school back in the day, Peter Falk was a guest and came and spoke with us. And he was famous for, in the early 60s, he was nominated for an Oscar. And he and his wife took a Volkswagen Beetle to the Oscars, which was like a huge change of pace when everybody was taking limousines, kind of a thing. And I remember thinking at the time, well, you completely upped him on this, and this is going to go down as Oscar lore. And so thank you for that story and telling us.
You mentioned a dear friend too. I got to thank Peter Falk for so many things. He was born like me on September 16th, a few years apart, but we were good friends. We had a birthday together many, many years, and we were very close friends. And what a great actor, what a simple fellow who promoted that sort of thing, as you say, that kind of simplicity. And I really loved him and his wife, Cheryl. So thank you for mentioning those wonderful people.
Yeah, no, I was familiar with your connection with him, and I have it makes total sense to me that you guys would have been of similar ilk in terms of and get along quite well. So is there another kind of a converse of the question I asked you in terms of, is there a situation where being an advocate for the environment and being very known and outspoken for living more sustainably has potentially helped your career that you can think of?
It absolutely helped in ways right around the same time that that incident was happening on the set of Pagemaster. They did an episode of The Simpsons mocking me, which was the highest praise I've ever gotten in my life. Okay. My kids saw me work with Meryl Streep or Jack Nicholson or other people like that, and they were duly impressed. But when I was on The Simpsons, I was clearly a movie star or something. I clearly arrived in the eyes of my kids, and it was a good way to promote the message. And I did a good many other shows after that where I played not a role in a TV show or a movie, but I played myself and was able to promote certain, important things in so doing. So it seemed to be a liability for some situations, but it was much more an asset, to get that word out and to use the megaphone responsibly. And I think that's what we have. We who are famous in show business, sports, medicine, law, politics, whatever. You have this megaphone, you're on stage there before the full audience, but the fire marshal has come up to you, and tapped you on the shoulder and said, there's a problem down in the basement. There's a small fire, but we want to vacate row by row. So if you could please stop your song and dance and just tell people about the problem very reasonably, please. We don't want to panic people, but we want to get people doing things. That was James Hansen back in 1967. That was me back around the same time talking about these things. You know, am I supposed to still continue to do a song and dance? That's what people say. You're an actor. Just keep doing your acting. Don't bother me. You're not a scientist. But I was on stage, pardon me, when the scientist, the fire marshal has come and tapped me on the shoulder and said to me, and I'm talking about Henry Kendall, who won a Nobel Prize for discovering the quark, people like that from the Union of Concerned Scientists, people like James Hansen, people like, these incredible, scientists that I've known over the years, Nobel Prize winning scientists that have done this incredible work. So we have to continue to promote this incredible legacy of good scientific information. And no one's been better at it than my friend Al Gore. He's just extraordinary. He's been doing it since back when James Hansen spoke. He saw to it that James spoke there, in Washington, D.C. from NASA. And so he's just been an incredible beacon on climate change, the environment in any possible way. And I'm just forever in his debt. He's a good friend and our greatest ally in climate change.
And I think you bring up an interesting point. I think it's so important that we don't just rely on scientists to solve these problems. I mean, they're pointing them out, but we all have to kind of adopt kind of the Benjamin Franklin didn't have a bunch of degrees, but he was a person who was constantly looking for solutions in his day, and kind of a gentleman scientist back in the day kind of a thing. And I kind of see an element of that in you and what I understand about you, because whereas you are quick to say you're not an expert in given fields, you have made yourself an expert in some of these fields from me hearing you speak and talking about these things in terms of learning about solar systems, wind systems, renewable energy, your electric cars. You didn't just drive one. You found out about it and became a spokesperson for electric cars. I mean, your discussions in Who Killed the Electric Car are one of the highlights of that film, where you're talking about the importance of that particular phenomenon and setting the stage to inspire people to get to where we are today, where I think we've hit a tipping point where everyone's accepted the electrification of automobiles is coming. And that only happened because people kept fighting the resistance that was out there with good hard facts.
I agree. I would certainly agree with that. And I think to give fairness to personal action, people are saying we're not going to solve this with old white guys changing their light bulbs. And that's certainly true. That's not it alone, but the basic structure that a movie is shot on or TV show is a tripod. There's 3 legs to it. Ansel Adams and his beautiful photographs, a tripod. If you have just a 2-legged anything, it's not going to be steady. Certainly a 1-legged unipod doesn't give you what you need to keep things steady. But the 3 legs of a tripod, and the 3 are personal action, very important things that I've done and many people have done since 1970 that have shown that these things can work, that wind power works, that solar power works, energy efficiency works. That's one key leg to the structure. The other is corporate responsibility, to get corporations to do the right thing and make sure they're eventually making more efficient light bulbs and cleaner vehicles and cleaner power plants or what have you. And the third is good legislation. We clean up the air in LA to a large extent because of the Clean Air Act signed by one Richard Nixon. So this is what you have to remember. It's good legislation that helped us too. Personal action, corporate responsibility, and good legislation. That's the way it happened. And since 1970 to date, we have 4 times the cars in LA since 1970, millions more people, but a fraction of the smog, much, much less. It's much cleaner in the LA air base. And now, having said that, we are not done. I'm not saying we've cleaned up all the air in LA. The people at the fulfillment centers, the shipping centers, the ports of Long Beach and San Pedro, these people need help. And I mean yesterday. And long ago, they needed our help. We have to continue to help them near the refineries. There's dirty air there. But we've shown that we can do it with cleaner power plants, cleaner vehicles, cleaner everything, cleaner light bulbs, cleaner energy-saving thermostats, solar thermal. All of it together has helped us get there to get overall cleaner air. Now we got to get it for everybody in every part of the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one thing that I would like your perspective on, because I anticipate you are a person being well known as an environmentalist. I anticipate commonly get people coming up to you who ask what they can do, who will be the kind of people who kind of get zone out and become intimidated if you start listing 1,000 things that they can do to change their lives. So if someone comes up to you and they're well-intentioned and they know that you have knowledge in this area and they want to know, what is it that I can do that I'm not doing right now? And you understand from the vibe of the conversation that this is not a person that's going to take a list of 25 things home and remember it. How do you shave that into something to get them on the path toward a more sustainable life where they'll find those kind of choices valuable? What would you say to that person?
I try to keep it soundbite simple. I tell them, get out of your car as much as you can. You know, that might mean taking public transportation. That might mean riding a bike, you know, if weather and fitness permit. But a lot of people don't live near public transportation. So whatever it means to you, get out of your car as much as possible. That's going to be a very good thing. The other thing I say is support a group like NRDC or the Climate Reality Project. People like that are doing this important work that you guys are doing, that my friends at the NRDC are doing, that really has made a change, such a change, that it helped me in so many ways to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish environmentally in many different ways. So I couldn't have done it without these great groups. And that's the simple thing. Support these great groups like you guys, and things are going to improve.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, I think we're now kind of in a race where the awareness is going to result in action in time to offset the problems that we're creating, which is kind of, you know, the migration of how things have happened in the time since 1970, like you were talking about. We've made tremendous progress in pollution. That being said, as of right now, transportation is still the #1 greenhouse gas contribution in California.
Right.
So even with all that progress, we're still facing a major hurdle there. And so, you know, promoting public transportation, getting people to make some lifestyle changes that, frankly, once you adapt to them, don't seem that difficult and seem rather natural and healthier and better. But it's hard to make those steps in a lot of ways.
It's easy to say, and I've said it myself. You know, we're not going to save this changing light bulbs. We're not going to save this riding our bikes. We're not going to, and all that's true. But that one thing, it's not going to do it. But all these things together combined, once again, it bears repeating, with corporate responsibility and good legislation. Those three things are it. That's a winning combo. If we can do that, and it has to be with equal weight, equal effort, equal length, equal strength. It has to be not one flimsy leg of the stool. They have to all be robust and do it together. And we can do this. Al's proven 100 different ways we can do this, and Lord knows we can.
Yeah, I wanted to transition here just a little bit. And I know recently you just released your memoir. And I know you have it there behind you. And we're going to be giving away a copy of that tonight for people who are actually paying attention to what's going on. We'll ask a trivia question after this, along with a couple other things we're giving away. And I want to ask you, when you went through the process of kind of combing through your life and all those kinds of choices that you've made along the way, when you reflected back on them, were there particular key turning points in your life where you made decisions to try to do things in a more sustainable way that ended up changing your life later? And I know you cover some of this in your book, so you know I'm kind of tapping into that to see where you would like to talk about it. But in particular, I'm curious how the process of writing the memoir made you reflect and maybe even rediscover some things that you hadn't thought about in a long time in terms of your environmental journey.
You know, I did a lot right back in 1970. I lived a very simple life. The first Earth Day, I was living in an apartment. I bought a little electric car for $950. When I say electric car, I mean electric cart, a golf cart with a windshield wiper and a horn, basically. But it was a good car and inexpensive. It got me around. So my life was very simple, and I had a very, very low carbon footprint. I didn't know that term, of course, at the time, but I was very happy with that. But then I continued to recycle and do those things, and to, you know, have an energy efficient car. But electric cars wouldn't get me to where I need to go for work and a family. I had a young family, and I had to compromise. But I still tried to remain true to my ideals. When I got sane elsewhere, you know, I wasn't going to invest in some, you know, Exxon stock, certainly, or something like that. So I invested in a wind turbine in the California desert that put out many homes worth of power from 1985 till 2015, actually. For 30 years there, I had the bragging rights to say, I'm not just carbon neutral, I'm carbon negative because of that. And that was a pipsqueak. That was a 75 kilowatt wind turbine, the 1985 version, not the big megawatt and a half, 2 megawatt, 3 megawatt things that are up there now. This was a small one, but the impact of buying that and making that investment, putting my money down and putting up that wind turbine had a very good effect, and I like that. But again, I kind of strayed. I didn't drive an electric cars because they weren't around. And then I woke up again back in 1989. I could see people weren't really paying the kind of, they weren't paying enough attention. It was a 20-year anniversary of Earth Day the next year in 1990, and we were in big trouble. I could see coral reefs were dying, amphibians were dying off, things were happening in a way that just wasn't sustainable. Climate change was becoming more of a reality. Ozone depletion became a big concern for people, and we had to do more. So I decided to up the ante and to just stop buying gasoline at the pump. So 1990, part of my journey was to stop, buying gas for an internal combustion vehicle. I still was buying fuel as part of my Greyhound bus ride. If I'd go back east on a Greyhound bus, and I did, believe it or not, I'd take a Greyhound bus cross country just to save fuel, because you would get like 300 miles per gallon per capita. You really would, because of the amount of people on a Greyhound bus and the mileage that it got. So I did that sort of thing, and I liked it a lot. But I just wanted to do more. And pretty soon I could have, in fact, back as far back as 1985, I put solar hot water up in my house. I lived in Ojai, California, a beautiful spot. And I put solar up there. But I bring Ojai up for another reason. I was still trying to run away. I was trying to get away. I wanted my family in a nice, safe place in beautiful Ojai. And, LA was lost to me. And what couldn't be saved. And then I thought better of that, and I decided to move back to LA, which I did back in 1990. And I started doing stuff even more and became even more zealous about it, more serious about it in every part of my life. And that's what got me to this point today, where I have, I live in a LEED Platinum house, and I'm very proud of that, and proud of the way that I work with other fine organizations to support good organizations and good companies, clean companies, and good legislation. But it's been quite a journey, and how lucky am I to have the good fortune, to live in a LEED Platinum house. It's part of my journey, and not everybody can afford it, but everybody can do something, and everybody should do something. We have to make sure that the funds and the technology is available to the people that need the most help with the utility bills, not just for environmental reasons, for financial reasons and reasons of, heat and not sweltering in it and not freezing in the winter.
Well, I think that overlaps with your your premise on the 3 legs of the tripod. I mean, something like a LEED Platinum house might be cost prohibitive for some people at this point, but the whole idea of USGBC, the United States Green Building Council's guidelines, is to get those kind of guidelines into legislation, get those kind of guidelines into local codes and local requirements, with the idea that over the long haul, once you can make a requirement to make something in a much more sustainable way, it can become much more cost effective, because it becomes code, and it becomes the aggregate of everybody doing it the same way, which makes things bigger, cheaper, in bulk, and all those things. And so we wouldn't be anywhere without the pioneers who try those technologies first. And so it's really important that you've done some of that. But it's also really important that we remember the mantra of those 3 legs that you're talking about, because if we can't then get that into codes, we can't get corporations to actually adopt those policies, and building industry people to adopt those policies. And I want to kind of get your perspective on that based on some questions that have been coming up in the chat. We have a lot of lip service that happens in the environmental movements right now. And as corporations have come on board more to the public benefit of being of promoting environmentalism and of saying they're environmental, we get terms like greenwashing that are quite applicable in situations where and it happens in an institutional level too. One of the references we saw here was that the COP28 conference has somebody who is from a major oil company and who's heavily involved in it, and that's not one isolated example by any means. And it's also a situation that sometimes with people in good positions doing difficult work of legacy industries that are pollutive, we don't want to replace those people who are not sympathetic to our message. So I'm curious your perspective on what we as individuals can do as we continue to work to get that legislative component, to get that corporate accountability, and to understand that it's living by example is not enough if we can't get those other elements.
Yeah, I constantly struggle between, being practical and doing things that work within the system to make sure that things are available at a cost-effective price for everybody. I'm always trying to do that, but I'm always careful to not allow myself to be co-opted and be part of something that seems clean and green, but isn't it at all. And so that's a big challenge. And I rely on my friends for that kind of guidance. I regularly call friends, at the NRDC and elsewhere. I'm on the board of the Coalition for Clean Air and other groups that do that sort of work. And I look to them for expertise because it's a challenge. You want to be reasonable. You want to do things that are affordable and not just make it a choice for the elite. I understand that. That's very important. But also you don't want to do something that, in its cost-effective nature is now doing nothing but show. It's just, it's just window dressing. It's a constant challenge and I struggle with it. And I'd be lost without my friends at the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is another place I check in about this stuff, about different claims made about different technologies and things. And they're always pretty knowledgeable about it as well.
I think that's kind of comforting to some of us in a way that even Ed Begley Jr., it doesn't have a solution there that's perfect because we all are facing that same consternation at times. And we all have to reach out to reliable sources and get information and just do the best we can. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and then I'm going to transition to a little Q&A with some of our membership who I know are excited to speak to you. I want to ask you a little bit about the television show you did on HGTV a while back, you and your wife, some time ago, where I think it was called Living with Ed. And
yes.
You went around and talked to different Hollywood celebrities and helped them make steps to be more sustainable in their lifestyle. I'm curious about the process of working with networks on something that was such a personal journey for you. Did you get pressure to promote certain items that or certain products that you maybe had questions about, or to stay away from stuff that was too extreme? Or did you have more control on that messaging? And I'm curious about the process of doing that process, because it kind of married your advocacy with your career in a very direct way. And I'd like to hear a little bit about your perspective on it.
We did that show called Living with Ed back in 2007, 8, and 9. We did it 2 years on Home and Garden, then 1 year on Planet Green. Then Planet Green folded up, and so there was no outlets for us anymore. But it was a constant challenge. You're right to say it. You have to hold the line. You have to be vigilant about not being part of an effort to promote something that is either untrue or not really environmentally sound. And there were some products that, were proposed to me that were in that category. So I steered clear of them, or, briefly started talking about them and then abandoned my support because they weren't doing what they purported to do. So that's a real challenge. I fight it all the time. And a reality show, here's the most important thing you need to know. People are really savvy nowadays. They were back in 2007, 8, 9, even. When we did a thing one time, they decided to stage a bit they thought would be funny, and talk about not, using, plastic, single-use plastic for water bottles. Here's what they did. They had me go to the cupboard, open up the cupboard to get a plate. And when I opened up the plate, supposedly my wife had put in there like 20 water bottles. She had suddenly had 20 bottled water things, and my wife would occasionally be seen drinking from a plastic water bottle back then. So they had this thing, and I opened the thing and I discovered that these water bottles were in there to get the shot and get the laugh. I see these 20 water bottles. I go, Rochelle, I kind of yell, and I go off and we have a scene about why are you buying water bottles and all that. But people are savvy. They all knew it was bogus. You know how they knew? Because we had some set, assistant and what have you had, as requested and as proper, taken all the labels off the bottles. They took the labels off the bottles so we're not promoting a brand of water bottle. So people knew it was a TV show setup. There weren't just bottles in there without labels. you know, and you could see even a little piece of the label there. It wasn't like some brand of water, but you know, water that had no label. People knew about that sort of thing. So you can't fool people. There was, I think, one other thing, I can't remember what it was that people caught that was entirely bogus. Oh yeah, we were there at there was a methane recovery facility out in Lodi, California. And the whole setup is pure fantasy when you think about it. I supposedly brought Rochelle there to propose my love to her, to renew our vows or something. And I did it on a top of a big rubber bladder for methane gas from a dairy farm. It's basically cow manure underneath this or what have you. And I'm proposing to my wife, we're already married, but I'm proposing to her for an upcoming segment that we're going to do in Vegas where we renew our vows, but I'm doing it on a sea of methane. That was complete baloney, of course. You know, they thought it would be funny and what have you, but it was like I would even I would take her there, like she would put up with that or find that amusing. So people are savvy, they would catch you when you try these things. So don't try, keep it real, keep it honest. That's the only way to do it.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask you one last question before I open it up to our wonderful attendees this evening. And this is a question I asked everybody in our series that we've been doing in these interviews. As advocates, we all face moments where we feel like it's just not working. Everything we do, we're pounding our head against the concrete to try to knock down that wall, to try to make a change happen. We're working on it. And it just seems that the odds of success are too low and the work is too hard. What do you do to regroup, to mentally refocus when you face those situations where you're trying to do something that you feel is really important for climate, for the work that you think is important to save the planet, and it just seems like you're not getting anywhere?
That's a very good question. I struggle with it all the time. I finally learned in my old age to stop doing 10 things poorly and to do 3 things well, to not serve on too many boards and try to do too many things, work on too many pieces of legislation that I don't have time for, don't have at my age the energy for, to just try to do less in a way. There's a wonderful saying, don't just do something, stand there. And one would argue, I would many times in my life argue again, what do you mean stand there? We got a lot of work to do. We can't just stand here. The coral reefs are dying and ozone depletion, and we've got all these problems. The amphibians are dying off. All true. And you're not going to stand there forever. But for now, just for right now, stand there. Get yourself centered. Find your bliss. Find your serenity. And then go about doing 1 or 2 things, perhaps 3 things well. Don't try to do 20 things poorly. I ran around like a madman my whole young life trying to do all these things. Do less sometimes. Less can be more. And in my case, it certainly was. Do less and focus on just, 1 thing for that year, perhaps, and get that accomplished and not try to do too many. So that's my advice to people. You must be centered first. Don't just do something, stand there, and then act.
You have a somewhat similar answer in the last chapter of your memoir. And for those of you who want to have something like that and be inspirational to you, buy a copy of that memoir, because the last chapter is really a great way to end it. It's a very personal statement about what you do to just keep the energy going. And so I appreciate it very much. I'm going to open it up now to some questions from our group. So if you guys could raise your virtual hands while we have a few more minutes with Ed, and we will field some questions from the group here. Don't be shy. I'm not looking in the chat room. I don't have time to scroll back and look at everything. All right, let's go with Jeannie first.
Hi, I'm so glad to hear your work over the years. I guess my question relates to your use of, being a celebrity and promoting climate issues. And I guess one of the things we feel in the climate world is, so much getting more people involved and more action. Is there, from your work in Hollywood, are there other people or ways to engage people who have these kind of platforms to get more people involved with climate action, in your opinion?
Yes, there's not time to go door to door with this. I don't think that I don't mean to diminish going door to door. My friends from Greenpeace regularly go door to door my neighborhood. I'm always happy to see them. So, but we can't fully solve this by just going door to door. We have to use the media to our advantage. We have to use electronic media, social media, print media, everything you could imagine. We have to do it all because otherwise we're not people. It's not going to happen. People have to be made aware of what needs to be done. And we here in America can do so much because we consume so much. We can change that, the way we consume, the amount we consume, and to show that it's not cool to go in a stretch limo to any of these award ceremonies anymore. It's cool to go in an electric vehicle or even on your bike, or as I did last Oscar ceremony, I went with my daughter Hayden. We went on the subway. You know, we took a subway to one stop away from the Oscars and walked the rest of the way. So that sort of thing, I think, is important to, to get people involved who are high profile in entertainment, sports, medicine, law, politics, anything that we can. Any way we can get our hands on a megaphone, any way we can get a slightly higher platform, any way we can get slightly above the crowd to, to try to reach them and to use that bit of notoriety to our advantage with a responsible message. And that means getting educated on the environment, make sure you're promoting the right message and not something that is, based on specious claims.
Nanju, you're up.
Were your parents also environmental advocates?
What a great question. My dad was a conservative that liked to conserve, and I'm not a conservative, but I have great respect for him because he didn't use the word environmentalist much, but he was one. Why? Because he was a son of Irish immigrants. He had lived through the Great Depression. We turned off the lights, we turned off the water, we saved string and tinfoil and everything. And he died within a few days of the first Earth Day. So I did all these things really to honor him as much as being part of Earth Day. Why? Because he would say to me when I'd complain about the smog back in the 60s, years before the first Earth Day, I'd say, I hate this smog. Why do we have this smog? This smog is terrible. And can't we do something? And he would always say, Eddie, I know what you're against. You're against the smog. I don't like the smog either, but what are you for? It's interesting to hear what you say no to, but what do you say yes to? And so that was a very powerful statement to me. Do something about it. Take the bus around town, ride your bike, try to get, to help build an electric car one day. This is back in the mid 60s. Do something. You don't like smog, do something to clean up the air. And that really resonated with me, though he was not, he was not what I would call a progressive. He was a very good man, and he was in many ways, a guy, a real steward of the earth. So I miss him and I loved him a lot.
And for those of you who don't know your Hollywood history, Ed's father was an Oscar-winning actor. So he was a big deal in the industry as well.
He was.
So Kate, you're up.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ed, so much for being with us tonight. This has just been fascinating. My question is, how do you hold on to hope?
That's a very good question, because I will confess to you now, I certainly lose it on occasion. I lost it in 2016 when all the things happened that happened in 2016. I lost a great deal of hope. I've lost it more recently when other things have happened. And I show up for that kind of pain and loss of hope. I accept that it's happening. I don't deny that it's happening. And then I digest it and think about, what can I do to make a difference? What can I do to make a difference about this bad thing that's happened in 2016 to 2020, January 6th? Pardon me. What can I do to make things better? And I try to find those ways. And it's a challenge sometimes, but I turn it around. I accept the incredible negativity I see before me. I don't deny that it is, but then find some way to do something positive to change it. And it's often quite difficult. It requires meditation. That's the only way I can get myself ready to deal with it. Serious meditation.
Stephen.
Oh, hi, Ed. I'm just curious to know if you adopted a whole food, plant-based diet or a vegan diet. Thanks.
Yes, I became a vegan back in I became a vegetarian back in 1970. I haven't had red meat or veal or lamb or pork or anything since 1970. But then I became a vegan back in 92. But I will confess to my vegan friends who I love, I'm not really a vegan 100% anymore. I'm a megan. By that I mean I'm a mostly vegan. I've wound up with Parkinson's and some other challenges in my life that have caused me to have some things occasionally that are not purely vegan, but I do the best I can. I'm a 74-year-old man that does the best he can, and I'm not making excuses. Diet is a big one. The fork is one of the most dangerous weapons we've ever held in our hand. You know, my friend Howard Lyman talked about at great length. He was a former feedlot operator and cattle rancher and what have you. With my friend, Greg, he did a wonderful book called Forks Over Knives. And so I'm sorry, Glenn Mercer, not Greg, Glenn Mercer, my wonderful friend Glenn Mercer. So I love my vegan allies. They do a great deal, and diet is one of the best things you could do starting today. So do it and stay as true to it as you can. And we can make some big changes if we just really, many of us concentrated on diet.
Thank you.
I'm gonna follow up on that, and because you mentioned this in your book, so I feel like it's okay to talk about it. But you mentioned that you had the first signs of Parkinson all the way back in 2004 until you had a diagnosis in 2016, and you credit healthy diet and healthy living, exercise, and all these things in meaning the onset of this is much, much slower than it has been with most people traditionally. And you are still at your age working as an actor and still involved, even though I'm sure you have many physical challenges because of the Parkinson's.
It's true. According to my neurologist, if he was grading on the bell curve, he says to me every time I go in, I'd be the head of the class. Because even though I've had it for many years, I do everything he tells me as an AMA neurologist. They have some very good drugs that can help with this nowadays, but also I do for extra credit some wonderful stuff my wife found, which is glutathione. I do something called NAD. I do hyperbaric chamber, vigorous exercise, good diet. I do all those things, and that makes a tremendous difference. That's what's kept me going now since 2004 when I really first had it, and being diagnosed 2016. Not everybody's doing as good. So I think if we did some of these other things as well, we could help. But let me back up for a second. I want to talk about why, and many people hold this opinion, why there's so many people getting Parkinson's and other neurological diseases. They think it has to do with head injuries, and sadly I've had quite a few of those. It might be quite, a big part of it, but also toxics. I lived next door to a perchloroethylene dry cleaner for a lot of my young life out in Long Island. I worked over a trichloroethylene tank there was no OSHA back then in 1968, no ventilator, no respirator, no nothing. You're just breathing these crazy fumes. I drank ant poison as a kid, 1-year-old crawling on the floor. I drank ant poison. So I had a lot of toxic hits. So our toxic environment that we live in today is, I think, part of what's causing so many people to have so many neurological problems. They haven't proven that 100%, but they think it's head injuries and that. And I certainly have had a good deal, many of both. I won't bore you with how I got my head injuries, but I did. I've been in some bad car accidents and what have you. But I'm still here and thriving, and I think that's because of good diet and exercise and living in a non-toxic world for many years now.
Christopher, you're up.
Thank you, Ed. Greatly appreciate your commitment. Honestly, you inspire me, and I'm sure many people. My question is that, I'm seeing, of course, the electric bike explosion and all of this that, greatly is kind of appealing to an optimism. But more than that, what would you say might be a feedback loop that any of us, myself included, for sure, would reference to kind of know if maybe e-bikes or whether we got to go a different direction to make a difference?
When I was a younger man, by that I mean before age 65 or so, I scoffed at e-bikes, and I liked my pedal only bike. I didn't need any help. Then I got a little bit older and I realized sometimes I needed a little assist getting back home or getting up a hill and what have you. So I think e-bikes can have tremendous merit, but they have to be driven safely and at a speed that's consistent with other, pedestrians and things like that. Certainly going the wrong way on the sidewalk, an electric bike at a high rate of speed, I don't think that's a very good idea. And I've seen people do it recently. So I'm a big bike advocate. I'm not trying to beat up on bikes at all. I think regular bikes, those you pedal only, are fantastic and encourage people who like that. I certainly liked it for my whole young life. And e-bikes have a place as well, but they must be driven and used and permitted in places responsibly, because you don't want to be scattering people off a sidewalk or trying to do their shopping and you're coming along at 28 miles an hour on an electric bike.
Aaron.
Hi, Ed. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us. As we dive into advocacy, it's easy to become labeled it's easy to become very zealous about these topics because they are very pressing and they are very important. But I think there is a tendency, people, even family and friends, tend to kind of write you off as a one-track record. So my question is, how can you avoid being sort of written off and keep people engaged in what you have to say without just being labeled like the environment guy?
I'm going to say something very odd now, but I mean it. I don't mind at all being written off now. And I mean that. I want to hear from Greta more than I want to hear from me. I really do. She's really saying the most important stuff. Our world is on fire, and I'm talking about electric bikes and what have you. And that's all good. And it's part of the solution. I'm not trying to denigrate anything I do or all my other activists and people lead a green life. That's important. But we have to do more. When I see her commitment, taking a sailboat, nauseous beyond words, to get over to America. I've certainly tried to avoid flying, but once in a while I get in a plane. I hate it when I do. I went for years there with COVID and other things before and after without flying, and I loved it. So we need to listen to Greta more than me, and I don't mind being written off at all. I've done a good job for these past 74 years and will help out whatever small way or a big way I can. I'm not retiring from the environment. I'm just saying the voices I want to hear are people like Greta and that wonderful young lady from Los Angeles that lived right next door to an oil derrick and got very sick, got a very unfortunate form of cancer. And forgive me, I can't remember her name right now, but she's a real hero. And people like Dolores Huerta are still here talking about toxics in the environment. A friend and associate of my other dear friend, Cesar Chavez, who I had the honor and sadness of carrying his coffin through the streets of Delano. I'm talking about Cesar Chavez now, a great leader. So I look to those people, those that are still with us, like Dolores Huerta and Jane Goodall and Vandana Shiva, and of course, Greta. And those are the people I want to hear from right now.
I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to just say, man, you delivered. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, especially under the circumstances. And it also, something you said really drove something important home to me as well. When you said that as time goes on, you are trying to do fewer things and make fewer commitments, which I appreciate and understand. I've always been an advocate of do fewer quality choices than spreading yourself out too much. But that just says all the much more that you made the time to be with us here this evening when you're picking and choosing and being selective. And a heartfelt thank you on behalf of myself and our chapter. And in addition to the people who came tonight, we have a large membership that will watch this recording and will take advantage of this for a long time. And we just really, really appreciate you being here. And thank you for all you've done. I skipped my Star Trek question because I ran out of time, but I want to plug one more time. If you want to watch Future's End, the 2-part episode that has Sarah Silverman along with Ed Begley Jr., it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek Voyager. So go watch that. And, he kind of rocks that, playing a Bill Gates kind of character. And Ed, do you have any other parting words for us? Because you have been an inspiration to many of us, and we just really appreciate you coming tonight.
No, I'd only say you're right. Future's End is a great, great episode of Star Trek Voyager. I loved it. I loved being in and playing Harry Starling. It was great. And my final, I guess, quote that I always try to remember to say because it's very important. Live simply so that others can simply live.
I've got nothing that can follow that with any kind of impact, but we'll transition now. And thank you again. And we'll move on to our trivia. So if you're paying attention tonight, we're going to ask questions, and usually we give away one thing, but I've got 3 things to give away for you tonight. So I've already talked about Ed's memoir, which is a very recently released, hot off the presses book that talks about some of the things we discussed tonight. To be clear, he never mentioned this or asked me to promote it. I found out about it, read it, and asked some questions about it. He did not come here as some kind of press tour to promote his book, but I want to promote it because if you're inspired by Ed tonight, you should take a look at the book. So we're giving away a copy of that. That is the first thing I'm giving away. The second thing I'm giving away is the 2 DVDs of Living with Ed, the TV show that we talked about a little bit tonight, that have to come. They come in cardboard cases, which is, I'd never seen a DVD that was in cardboard instead of plastic. That's pretty cool. And then a book Ed did years ago, some of which I will say is a little bit out of date, but it's kind of interesting, and some of which is still very useful, which was Ed Begley Jr.'s Guide to Sustainable Living. That was done some time ago. And so, you know, when you see something about used compact fluorescents, just change that to LEDs and you know. So here's the way we do our trivia. We ask the question, and you type in the chat room the answer to the question. And the first person who types the correct answer that gets in the chat room with the correct answer is the winner of the first gift. So the first thing we're doing tonight is the memoir, since I mentioned that first, the brand new book that just came out recently. If you answer correctly, you have to give your email. Make sure you put your email in there. We'll follow up with you. Actually, I'll give you, contact us through the website, and we'll make sure that it's given to you either at the next event, if we do, the next time we do an in-person event, or we will send it in the mail to you. That's the best way for you. So first category tonight. When Ed was talking about very important messaging and the mantra that he has, he mentioned 3 legs of a tripod that are essential as an advocate. What are those 3 legs? I got to have all 3. How did Jeannie manage to get all 3 in before anybody else, and in 3 separate things before anybody else got an answer with all 3? I guess everybody else was typing all 3. All right, Jeannie, you did it. You did it unconventionally, but I'm gonna give that to you. So Jeannie, head of our climate youth committee, or climate curricula committee and youth action committee, is the winner of our book, our memoir of Ed. Yes, a little bit of pantomime applause there. There we go. Very good. Very good.
Charles,
Yes, sir.
I believe responsibility and accountability are 2 different words.
Responsibility and accountability. Corporate.
They are very good. I accept that friendly amendment. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. All right. That's
you.
actually very important. Do you
It
think
is important.
do you think we should pull the book away from Jeannie after I've already offered it to her?
No, I defer.
Okay. All right. All right. All right, Jeannie, you made it, but just by the hair of Andrew's grace. And so just keep that in mind as we go forward. All right. So for the next one, we're gonna do the 2 seasons of Living with Ed. And these have been opened because I watched them to prepare for this. To prepare for this interview. So they've been opened. So, you know, they're not super brand new. They're not scratched or anything, and they still work. So this is kind of a really cool show that he did, that he mentioned, that he talked about. Some of it is, I tend to think of myself as very involved in the building space. I am a USGBC Green Associate and heavily involved in advocacy at the state and local level for USGBC. So I know a lot of these things. And there was actually one thing in it that I learned about that I didn't know, which was a soy-based insulation that they were using in a couple of the episodes as a spray insulation that I hadn't read about or heard about. So there's some interesting things in here, even for the person who's already nerding out on things you can do to improve your home, and then some very simple things as well. Again, when they talk about CFLs, just think LEDs, you get the point. So
Thank you.
for the DVDs of Ed's, do you have something to add, Ed?
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification.
Cool.
There's a few things I cringe at, but thank you for saying most of it's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I 100% hear what you were saying. I have to say the entertainment factor is the bickering between Ed and his wife, which seems kind of their mode when they're in front of other people. And you'll get your own take on that. And sure, some of it is very much for the camera. We get that, but it's a lot of fun. And his wife is an equal part of the show. And we even see his daughter as a very she's probably about 10 or something at the time.
Yes, she is back then. Yes, she is.
And she, if you don't know, is his daughter Hayden, his third child, is a pretty well-known social media personality at this point, and promotes a lot of the things that Ed works on through social media.
And she works at LA Metro now, the transit agency in LA. She works at LA Metro.
Absolutely. And your other daughter, Amanda, is on the Metro Sustainability Council with me, and I've interacted with her on numerous occasions. She's doing really good work silently in the background, not a real public face, but she's involved working with tree people and is a real advocate as well. I'm sure Nicholas is involved in stuff as well, but I'm not familiar. So, all right, here we go. So, season 1 and season 2 of Living with Ed, the DVD. The question is, Ed talked about an episode where he opened a cupboard and had cupboard door, and he was surprised by what item that had been kind of planted there. I'm going to give this one to Aaron. Aaron has water bottles, and that's the answer we were looking for. Aaron, you have won season 1 and season 2 of Living with Ed. Last but not least, Ed Begley Jr.'s Guide to Sustainable Living. We have a third category. Remember during the interview, I talked about how Peter Falk drove a Volkswagen Beetle to the Oscars in the early 60s? And then Ed one-upped him by doing what to get to an awards bank or award ceremony? Oh, this one everybody knew. All right, I think Kate was the first answer. We just go with bike, riding his bike. That is absolutely correct. Kate, you have won Ed Begley Jr.'s Guide to Sustainable Living. So very cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming. If you are interested in that memoir, it is out now, and you can get it through all the traditional bookstores and online sources, and lots of good anecdotes in there and history. There's a Charlie Manson story in there. There's all kinds of Hollywood lore, in addition to stuff about Ed's journey and in terms of environmentalism, his personal journey. He opens up stuff. He talks about Parkinson's. He talks about a lot of stuff. It's a really nice read. So take a look at that if you can. If you can't afford it, try to check one out from a library. But it's very, very good read. All right, people, we're going to wrap it up this evening. I want to remind everyone that our holiday end of the year last chapter meeting, again, is going to be on December, what was that, the 17th? December 17th, a Sunday evening at 7 p.m. We're going to have online games and shenanigans and all kinds of festivities. And we have committee meetings coming up, and some in December, some in January. Lots of activities. We're going to have more in this series at the beginning of the year. It's going to be hard to follow up with Ed, but we're definitely going to have more guests that are going to have more interesting stories for you in our Climate Movers and Shakers series. And we hope that you will join us for those meetings as well. Thank you very much, everybody. We're wrapping up on time, so I try to keep the trains running on time when we can here. I appreciate everyone coming this evening. Thank you to all the leadership for helping making this evening happen. Thank you again for Ed, for all that you do, and for coming tonight, especially under difficult circumstances. And good luck to everybody. Keep fighting the good fight. Come to our committee meetings and get involved in what we're doing. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Great questions. Great everything. Bless you all.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dad.
Thank you.